Welcome. I'm Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenteric.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoy this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NVG Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to another Moment with Eric Fleming. I am your host, Eric Fleming. And today, y'all, I'm excited, but I'm going to give you a warning. This is a long episode. But I'm excited, even though it's a long episode, is because the conversations that you're going to hear in this episode of the podcast center around the first 100 days of this administration, the second Donald Trump term. And I'm really excited. I mean, these conversations really, we get the young lady who is going to be on. She's basically in the world of DEI. And so she gives her perspectives about the challenges, not only being under this administration, but, just in general and where we should go. Then I have a young man who is not affiliated with the Democrats or the Republicans, who has started an organization to deal with issues, more of a libertarian, if anything else. But it's interesting. He gives an interesting perspective about where we are in these first 100 days, his criticisms, and even some things that he might have liked, right? And then, as a special treat, we have the podcast law firm of Pearson and Pearson. Yes, my good friends, Dr. Tracy and Melba, have teamed up again to give us another insightful conversation about the legal impact of what's happened over these first 100 days. So I know I'm asking a lot from y'all to sit through some of these podcasts because they're going to be long. But again, I will defend it because the detail in the conversation, to really get to know somebody, to really get them to take the time, and not in a soundbite, but to really get off a clear thought, I think is invaluable because it's a conversation. And we don't want to limit the conversation to 8 minutes, or 10 minutes, or 15 minutes even, right? We want to have an in-depth conversation. So if that means a long podcast, then it is what it is. But I hope those of you who faithfully listen do it because you appreciate the fact that we get in depth in these conversations and even the length of it, you're still scratching the surface sometimes based on the subject matter. That's especially true with my good friends, Tracy and Melba, when we get to talking about legal stuff going on. So let's go ahead and get this show on the road. And as always, we kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Eric. President Trump held events marking his first 100 days in office to highlight his administration's achievements amid unprecedented negative approval ratings. President Trump dismissed National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, appointed Secretary of State Marco Rubio as his interim replacement, and then nominated Waltz as UN ambassador against a background of criticism over the March signal call scandal. Columbia University student Mohsen Madawi was released from U.S. custody after a judge blocked his deportation tied to pro-Palestinian protests. The U.S. and Ukraine finalized a Trump-backed deal granting preferential mineral access to the U.S. and establishing a reconstruction fund. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals narrowly retained power in parliamentary elections after a campaign influenced by opposition to U.S. tariffs and policies. Wisconsin Judge Hannah Dugan was arrested and charged with obstructing a federal investigation by allegedly helping a man in her courtroom evade arrest. Former U.S. Representative George Santos was sentenced to over 7 years in prison for fraud and identity theft after pleading guilty to charges related to his 2022 election campaign. A former Taliban commander, Haji Najibullah, pleaded guilty to kidnapping a journalist and Afghan nationals in 2008-2009 and faces life imprisonment. Luigi Mangione pleaded not guilty to federal charges for the killing of health insurance executive Brian Thompson. Kenyan opposition lawmaker Charles Were was assassinated in Nairobi by motorcycle-riding shooters, with his driver surviving the attack. The historic Claiborne Temple in Memphis, a civil rights landmark and site of Martin Luther King's last campaign, was severely damaged by fire during a restoration project. Measles cases in Texas and New Mexico increased to 729. And Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, author and advocate for the education of Black youth, died at the age of 71. I am Grace G., and this has been a Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. And now it is time for my guest, Julia Ismael. Julia Ismael is the founder and head architect of Aspirations of the Equity Consortium, whose two-word mission is to institutionalize equity. Yet the title Julia is most proud of is mother of three. Julia boldly finds joy in bringing the gift of equity to the world by standardizing workplace complaint systems and offering community-created equity assessments for organizations across size, field, and sector. Moreover, Julia finds satisfaction in providing equity advocates and practitioners with these very tools to help us all in our collective mission to rebalance power and enjoy financial security by providing a system of mutual support. She looks forward to the consortium's monthly listening circles, a place between work and home to share story, curiosity, and wisdom as a necessary space to plan our collective future. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Julia Ismael. All right. Julia Ismael. How you doing, sister? You doing good?
So far, so good. It'd be hard to find something to complain about.
Well, I understand where you're coming from.
At least on my corner of the universe.
Yeah. You're in a good corner. You're up there in the great Pacific Northwest, Seattle. Been there a couple of times. It's very nice up there. I actually thought about trying to move up there once. Job didn't work out, but gave me a chance to hang around the city and get some of that Jones soda. Are you a soda drinker?
Oh yes, and Jones Soda, it's one of our pride of Seattle. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you got a chance to at least see the area.
Oh yeah, I got to take a tour. So sad story about my Jones Soda. So I got there, did the tour. They were trying out some sparkling water. I guess that didn't work out for them. So I got to sample that. And then I got a bottle of the Seahawks soda.
Yeah.
that they were selling. And I'm coming back and I get ready to get on the airplane and
Yeah.
the TSA guy says, "What's this?" I said, "It's my souvenir from the Jones Soda Company." He said, "Yeah, well, that souvenir's gonna stay with me. It's over 3 ounces." I was like, "No." I said, "You can't let that slide." He said, "No, brother, I gotta hold on to it." I said, "Well, I hope you enjoy it."
Yeah, unopened and everything. Ugh, what a shame.
I didn't get to drink it, but anyway, I hope I made that TSA guy happy.
Oh shoot, I know what to give you for your birthday.
So I do some other icebreakers, and you being a moderator by profession, you kind of understand that exercise. So I've got a couple for you. The first one is a quote. No matter how difficult, learn to tell the truth. What does that quote mean to you?
Oh my goodness. There is an absolute necessity for us, especially people who have been the subject of harm. It is a necessity that we learn how to speak our truth with grace. And the the gift of truth, we have to begin to see it as a gift. Being able to tell the truth is a sign of love. Say, for example, you've got something in your teeth, right? And your friend says to you, "Oh, you have something in your teeth." This is telling you the truth. Even though it's difficult, it might be uncomfortable or awkward, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do, to tell the truth. And so we're learning how to tell truthful things and not only listen with grace, but to be able to speak it with grace as well. So, yeah, lovely quote. Tell me the quote one more time again, because I liked it.
No matter how difficult, learn to tell the truth.
Yes.
I think that's actually a quote that either you said or some. I found it on the website, I believe. I think
Oh
that's
well.
yeah. I think that's something that you actually said. So
Well, that's probably why it resonates. Yes. Thank you, Past Julia, for being so insightful.
All right. So my next icebreaker is I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
17.
Okay. What's something about people who see the world differently than you that you've come to appreciate?
What is something about seeing the world differently that I've come to appreciate? Funny that you asked that in this time in my life. I just turned 48 years old, and my mother passed away earlier this year. My youngest child is now graduating from high school. And what I'm realizing is the the beauty in intergenerational thought. And as I'm transitioning from like adulthood to kind of baby elderhood, and I'm seeing my children go from child to young adult, there's an immense amount of learning that's happening on both ends to me. And so the perspectives of those who have come before me, those of my elders, and appreciating their perspective on life as it being different than mine, and even in terms of how we plan for the future and how far in the future we plan is another perspective I'm learning. And to look at the young people who are growing in their agency based on a whole new perspective of life. The future is very, they make me very optimistic in their ability to see things from completely, absolutely new perspectives and question reality to degrees I have never seen before. And so my job right now in the middle of these two differences is just simply remain open and excited about learning for the rest of my life. But yeah, lovely question again.
So, and I pulled this from your website too. Why do you describe yourself as an odd bird?
Mm. I am an odd bird. I have self-declared this because I realized after the last kind of paycheck job that I had, wherein I was working for other people's mission, even though it was in alignment with my own mission, life mission. It wasn't exact. And what folks are willing to tolerate for the paycheck in return for, being able to fulfill even a part of their life mission, what we're able to put up with and tolerate. I found myself at odds at so many instances where I just look up all of a sudden and I think, how are we able to say this? Why are the person who we're affecting is not in the room? Why do you think that this is fair? How has this always been done like this? It's not working. And I've seen it through, job positions, through volunteer positions. And 5 years ago, I thought, wow, if I apply for another job, I'm probably going to last about 3 or 4 months before they fire me because I'm so outside of the norm. My tolerance level is almost zero. And I have this need to kind of go back to your first question and around truth telling. There is an insatiable need for me to speak the truth. And I have made it my mission to do so in the most gracious ways. But I didn't start out like that. And so I realized through all of these experiences that, yes, I'm odd. I'm odd. But to the point where now I'm discovering even, you know what? Maybe it's not me. Maybe the rest of the world is odd and I'm the normal one. And so I have just decided to embrace that definition of myself, stop trying to fit myself into systems that were not designed for me and thinking it's my fault. And so that is my declaration of self-love. Yeah.
Well, I definitely can relate to that. I remember my dad telling me I was, I've been fortunate to have some very distinctive positions, but in the regular work world, I've made a lot of transitions. And I remember, I guess I was either in my 40s. I guess I was in my 40s. And my dad kind of pulled me aside and he said, Eric, I need you to do something for me. I said, what do you need, sir? He said, I need you to go into this job not being the smartest person in the building. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you have to understand that even though you might be better at the job than the person that hired you, you have to understand where you are and get situated and work within the system and all that kind of stuff. He said, I shouldn't have to tell you that because you've been in politics, but sometimes you weren't exactly like, what's the term I want to use? What did he say? You weren't exactly a follower, I think he said. When it came to politics, you were always kind of a maverick. And so, with this job, it seems like a pretty good job. Maybe you want to kind of humble yourself a little bit. So I definitely understand where you're coming from as far as like when you see something and you know it's not right and you're trying to figure out a way to navigate that without being offensive, trying to be constructive and really not trying to jeopardize your job. I definitely understand where you're coming from. All right. So
Yeah.
you stated that your mission is to institutionalize equity. How did and this is a quote from you, autodidactic degree in liberation of self, and a diploma from the secondary community school of hard knocks and love lead you to that mission?
Oh my goodness. Reading over my biography like this, oh my gosh. Yes. I I am a firm believer in lifelong learning. And the fact that we can re-examine our relationship with how we transmit knowledge and from who and when and where and why. I do consider myself a graduate from the School of Hard Knocks. There is no paper degree to document and quantify that qualitative experience of living in this skin, living in this body, in this culture and society. So, for example, like I have degrees from call universe, like a real paper going to debt level degree. But what they don't tell you as a person of color, as a person who's been actively marginalized and disenfranchised in this culture and society, what they don't tell you when you enter places of higher education or even, K through 12, there is an unseen expectation to add to the richness of the classroom, right? Because of your very identity, just of the body in which you were born. And so while I would register for the same classes, say like my white male colleague, we're not taking the same class. We have the same content, but we don't have the same directives. We don't have the same roles. And how are we contributing to the education of our peers, which is often done in careless and harmful ways? And so the unseen, the uncredited burden of educating simply for the fact of this was the body I was born into and the world needs what I know is often uncredited. So I just went ahead and gave myself credit for it. I said I have done these things. I have uh, gotten lived experience. In my opinion, to be 100% perfectly honest, is not something that should ever be diminished in value. If anything, it should be elevated. As I was a paralegal, for example, for 13 years before this iteration of equity advocacy. And I work in law offices right alongside law students who have just come out of law school and they know nothing about how the law office works, right? How clients work. They know theory and function and paperwork and process, but they don't understand the practice, right? And so there is something that will and should never ever be taught in a classroom when it's so dependent on you have to live it, you have to experience it to understand it, to be able to transmit what you've learned. You have to experience the thing first. And so that's where that self-description in my bio comes from, in relation to my education, and how that manifests in how I um, gauge others' credentials. This is also a role that is a major factor in the way that I conduct my business. I do not rely on certificates and degrees alone to tell me how qualified this person is. My first question is, what is your lived experience? Everything after that will follow. And so, like, for example, anytime I do subcontracting work, my first question is, again, what is your lived experience? And my only second question to confirm their qualifications. I don't even ask for degrees. I don't care. The second qualification is, have you connected your lived experience to systems that are greater than yourself? And that's it. That is all I feel like a person needs to be qualified. Everything else we can literally read books, we can go online, we can get all of the same class curriculum as any class in any university. We can do these learning. It is not dependent on a system that has gate kept us from knowledge and advancement. I'm not depending on them to qualify people anymore. So, yeah, great question. You're making me want to reread my bio again and make sure that I'm ready now, though.
Yeah, but it's like you're a very transparent person from what I've gathered. And so that it's not surprising that you've been, when you put down your life story, your bio, that you're very revealing in that. And I was just thinking about when Kanye West first came on the scene. I guess the album was College Dropout. He had a lot of little interludes, and there was a constant theme in the interlude where it was like the dad, I guess, or the gentleman he was kind of following the interlude. He was going to school and getting all these degrees and all that stuff. And he ended up like on a park bench covered in his degrees. He couldn't function in society, but he was very, very educated according to the system. Right. And that was a statement he was making, that it's one thing to have the educational sense, but if you can't interact in life, which I think is ironic now considering who I'm talking about, if you can't interact in life, then all that paper doesn't matter. All that sheepskin doesn't matter.
That's absolutely.
So for the past, no, here's the question I want to ask first. Is the American culture ready to purposefully focus our attention on new practices, policies, and procedures that encourage equity and eliminate the opportunity for biases?
Are we ready? Are we ready for this?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
Whew. I'm at a place now, Eric, where I don't care if they're ready or not. We are. And that's the whole point. And it is in this new era, and it is so obviously to everybody a new era. This is a new time. And we, when I say we, people who have been advocating for equity this whole time, the people are standing up saying, I told you so, I told you so. Us. We've been preparing for this moment for a long time. Nothing that has happened recently is any surprise whatsoever. The pace, yes, the frenetic, urgent nature, yeah, maybe it's a little surprising, but these things have been in the works since the birth of America. And how are we preparing ourselves? My first objective in answering this question is to disengage from their interests. I have been advocating to my fellow equity advocates, the people who have actual, titles that say diversity director, this, and I've been telling them for years, watch out. Watch out. We are dependent on fulfilling our mission, our what we know, and not even just our mind, but our gut, our instinct, our ancestors are begging us to do these things. And we're being ignored, and we're still benefiting the organization because they get to check the box and say that they have us, while we get to not be able to live in our work. And are we ready? No, they'll never be ready. That's the whole point. They will never be ready, but it's not up to them anymore because we weren't ready either. We were never ready for their plans for us. So it's either they plan or we plan. And those are the only two options. And when it comes to preparedness, I have seen this beautiful evolution in the work of equity advocacy over the last couple of decades. It began with, let me describe the problem to you so that it will stop, right? I'm going to have whole bodies of research. I'm going to have whole courses and degrees. I'm going to have literature in every format possible to describe to you what this harm is. This is a microaggression. This is institutional racism. These are all the definite. And now we have appealed to the heart, to the mind, right? If you intellectually understand this, of course your better angels will come and respond, because nobody likes being a bad person. And that's true. I mean, we are good people, but it's not enough. It's not enough to simply understand what fire is when it's burning your house down. I can understand all the things about, the science of what it is, but it's not putting the fire out. And so here now we are in this beautiful position of, okay, we've answered what hurts, and we've done it down to the T. If you close your eyes and I pull a single hair anywhere on your body, you can tell me exactly what follicle it is. It is actually not that difficult. It's not that challenging to answer what hurts. What is most challenging is to answer what feels good, what works. And that's the question that we've been answering. Well, what's going to happen after all of this? racism is out of the office and people are not homophobic. Like, okay, what does that look like? What has changed? What in your circumstances, environment is making that possible? So, for example, Malcolm Gladwell, the author, he's a sociologist, has a lot of great books. In one of his books, he mentions the medical surgery students. And in the course of their education, they are given a surgery operating theater where everything is, you can see it in your head already. Everything is white, it's monochromatic, it is sterile, it is without texture, and it's for a very good reason because they need to focus on the subject, right? They have made an environment that is conducive to eliminate any distractions, to eliminate any emotional connection, right? So on the surgery, they will always, if they're able to, cover the face and they'll cover the hands, right? Because those are the most intimate parts of the place where we connect, right? And so they will focus on everything within that little area that they need to focus on, and everything else disappears. And that's the environment that makes that conducive. It works. So we apply that same philosophy to areas where we want to encourage connection, where we want to encourage like this. And so if we don't change the environment, how are we expecting the content to change? Right? And so we have to address people's better angels, their positive, ways we want to work. We have to give them the tools. It's not our fault that we inherit these bad systems. It's just not. We need to stop taking responsibility for that. They came before us. Even if I make my own business, I'm inheriting just models that I've learned, right? So we have to, first of all, disassociate and say, this is not my system, right? This is something I was given. I've done my best with it, but it's not for me. And it doesn't matter what body I was born into. It's not for me. It doesn't feel good. And so to be able to simply give somebody the tools to paint the room a pretty color, like going back to the surgery analogy, like what tool do you need to change your environment so that you can go back to normal, right? So that you can feel like you're matching the environment, right? You're not sticking out, right? Like this. And so that's why we focused on systems. And after doing evaluations, I have a really beautiful service for that too. But the results were you need complete systems. And thinking about my own personal experience, yeah, duh. I don't know. Like it took me years to come back to something that to me now seems so obvious. But I think it's because contemplating introducing a whole new justice system is so unbelievably daunting and so far outside of any one organization's mission. I can see why it has just been kind of kicked down the road, So we just said, okay, we're going to stop. We're going to pause everything that we're doing. And we, the Equity Consortium, we are going to make that our mission. And so, yeah, I can see why it took over a year and a half, dozens of people involved, and I don't know, probably 2,000 hours so far. So it's like, yeah, it's no small task. And to be able to kind of build that bridge between the past of what we know we don't need and the future of what we do need, but I don't know how to get there. That's where we have just dedicated ourselves to making that happen. And because we deserve it. We're so smart and we deserve it. It's our time to plan. Mm.
So, as
Yeah.
a follow up, for the past 100 days, the Trump administration has done their best to end DEIA and quote unquote woke culture. How much, excuse me, how much damage has been done, or is it too early to assess?
Oh, I'm kind of answer with both. Yes, there has been damage done already, and it's still too early to assess the depth of it. Yes. Oh gosh, where to begin? What concerns me the most in all of these most recent actions is not actually the immediate impact, it's the lasting impact. The one thing that keeps me up at night. I mean, of all the 1,000 things to choose from, you might find this one really odd. But our museums, our legacy, our connection to objective history is being systemically erased. And the responsibility to document our history as humans, as humanity, in this great experiment of America is being erased. And like women in STEM on NASA's website, the individual who was, named and put the picture, that woman, she has her record of her being there and screenshots and whatnot. But where does it go? And are we ever able to get that back? And that's just our digital footprint. I'm concerned about our physical, historical records, our it's just having ancestors who were enslaved and knowing how traumatic it and how many generations it takes to reclaim one's history and connection to it. To me, that is the most traumatic event. Everything else they're doing, I literally don't care. I saw it coming. I have never depended on them for self-validation, for even a livelihood. And I'm very sorry to all of the people who have trusted in this system when they give them titles of diversity and this, that they have trusted in this system to protect them when it has never been true. And another interesting thing, though, that has been happening, and I am rooting for it 100%, I love it, is that there's a natural sifting going on here. There is an obvious call from organizations who are doubling down on their commitment to diversity, equity. Those are the people we're learning who to support and who to ignore, like Costco and Target. Perfect example. Like, where are we powerful? And this is something that I'm just in love with and terrified of at the same time. Like, I wake up recently, like the last 3 or 4 days, I've just been waking up thinking, what's stopping us? This whole system is predicated on the belief that people will naturally want to follow rules. They're going to get their tabs renewed. They're going to pay their mortgage. They're going to follow all the rules because that's the social contract. If I follow the rules, then I'm guaranteed, justice and safety and free like this, right? There was an exchange there, but we're realizing very concrete, tangible, in your face, this contract is broken. I have given everything. I have done everything I'm supposed to. And this is what you're doing in return. What's to stop us? And so I get giddy. I get super giggly. And then I also get like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be giggling so loud because what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, I can see it. I can feel it. It's about to pop off. It's about to pop off because you can push somebody so far. And it's a lovely thing about human nature is that there's a phenomenon called default to belief, right? We look for any and every reason to want to believe somebody's telling the truth. This is what keeps us alive. This is what keeps us in community. This is what keeps us together and bound to each other's fate. People who are trained to default to disbelief are police officers, right? A police officer will ask you where you're going and assume that you're lying, right? Ask you where you're coming from, assume that you're lying. But us, when we are defaulting to believing in this system, it takes, I don't know how many times to prove that somebody's lying to your face. They're lying to you. They don't care about your grocery bill. They don't care about your mortgage or your student loan. They don't. But how many times does it take to be convinced, right? And that's where we are. We're finally being convinced that we're being lied to. And that's a bad feeling. And it sucks. It sucks. It feels like I've been duped. I've been played for a fool, and they've been lying to me. Like, this makes me mad. Right. And so like this is a moment of reckoning. And my one and only job on this planet is to make sure that we are prepared for the day after. We recognize that they're lying. We have to build our truth. The meanwhile, so uh, and I'm Muslim, right? And so I have this beautiful faith that says there's a Allah is the best of all planners, right? And so my job as an individual, as one single soul on this planet, is to simply recognize and understand my part in a story that is greater than mine, my own, right? My own time, my own place. This story spans millennia, right? And we're just in a little part of it right now, doing our little part. But it is inviting growth with compassion, because it's our right to do so. And I'm never letting anybody ever again steal my magic. They can have it. I give it freely, but they can't steal it from me anymore. It's a distraction. And I'm tired. I don't have any more room for distraction. And so, yeah, great question. Definitely a question of our time. So ask me again in like 10 years and I wonder what the answer is.
All right. Hopefully it won't take that long to get you back on the show, but okay.
Oh, yeah. No, let's hope not.
All right. I'm going to I'm gonna ask you this question and then I'm going to close out because I had a couple more and I'm going to figure out a way to combine them. But the next question I want to ask you is, why are you not a big fan of the phrases thoughts and prayers, we condemn, we stand with, or our hearts go out to?
Oh, you read my how to write a statement on Palestine, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
That's where it sounds like it came from. Yes. I'm all about that action, boss. Coming here from in Seattle, we had, we have a phrase about that action, boss, because I can't stand it. It is language like that allows the status quo to continue. It is placating. I've heard it described as like masturbatory language, excuse my language, but it serves to self-satisfy, and it does nothing to the recipient. I don't need thoughts and prayers. I need like money and time off. Like I need tangible things and tools. And this is where I'm really finding a growing role in this emerging society for people of a spiritual base. Now, this might not seem connected at first, but as people who have been most affected by harm, we are not victims. We are students of life, and we have graduated from those learning, right? Our experience of oh, I don't even know how to put words on it. There's this gut feeling of absolute injustice where you feel voiceless and powerless, and people are actively dissuading you from believing that you feel like that. Like there's no way to teach this experience. And if there was, I wouldn't want to do it. I don't want people who have never experienced that to ever have to experience that kind of anguish of abject injustice, of moral, of spiritual injustice, right? That it affects even your health and who you are as a person. There's no way to quantify the value in that learning, right? The humility that comes with that type of experience, the empathy, the ability to empathize with someone else going through something similar, right? Those are to be skills that are going to be highly elevated in the future. We have to be led. by people who have been most affected. It is our right. And in exchange for that gift of our learning and of our experience, of our sacrifice, in exchange, we need resources. So we need power, we need money. That's the exchange. I don't need thoughts and prayers. I don't need your intent. I don't care about their intentions. I need concrete exchange, right? We need to rewrite the social contract. In exchange for my experience and expertise and compassion and wisdom, I will receive your resources, because we can't have one without the other. We are dependent on each other at this point in time. They have resources, we have knowledge, right? Brains and muscle, brawn, like this, right? And that is back to the fact of, I'm not waiting for somebody to give me power, to invite me to the table, to include me in their whatevers. I have my own. They can come to me, right? And then look, we are so clever. We have survived and sustained for so long with less than nothing. I don't actually even need their things. I don't need their resources. We have resources. Hope you watch Sinners. Movie Sinners. Oh, when you see it, pay attention to the economy of the plant of the sharecropping plantation. We had our own currency. We had wooden nickels, right? Because of the discrepancy between what is earned and what is owed, right? It's built in. We had to accommodate for the discrepancy, and we created our own currency. We don't need their resources. It is simply us and our infinitely gracious, soulful selves offering the rest of the world their humanity back. And Martin Luther King said a lot of super wise things. And one of the things he said was, we're in a position to restore the humanity of those who have oppressed us. Right. That is a power dynamic flip. I am so down for every last inch of it, because it feels right. It feels true. It feels like divine or moral, spiritual level of justice. Right. We once those who have been affected by harm, who have had the time and place to heal and to come together and plan for the benefit of the whole, we absolutely deserve our time to shine. And so does the rest of the world. Because I will tell you, hands down, maybe 1%, 2% of our humanity is just sociopathic. There's no fixing them, right? But I tell you, the rest of us, not a single one of us is not suffering. We're all suffering. White people suffering. All of us are suffering. Them on a spiritual, ethical, moral element level, us on a resource, worldly level. But each of us have what the other one needs. And I have made it a point since my day one to invite anyone and everyone, right? I don't have groups for, this one's for people of color and this one's for white people. No, we're human beings. And we have to begin to practice seeing each other as humans first, and then recognizing our unique healing journeys. Because white people need a lot of healing too, and I do not envy them for their to-do list, because mine's just like, I'm healing from resource stuff, like it's worldly stuff. But spiritual healing, that's hard. And I don't have nothing to say. Like, that's on them. That's their job. I can't even help. Right? That's their task on life. My task is to deal with, resource like this. So yeah, hearts and minds, good intentions, thoughts and prayers. No, I need action. Yes. So yeah, great question. Well, you're digging all the way deep on the website.
Yeah. I try to, because I really want people to know the guests that I have on. And so I think you answered the concept of what I wanted to make the final question.
Hmm.
because you talked about one of the things I wanted to ask you was dealing with government, and then one was with the Equity Consortium. And so gathered from that last statement, I would say that there's two power dynamics, right? So government has a power dynamic as far as money and resources and policy, whereas the Equity Consortium has a power dynamic of knowledge, because we understand that knowledge is power, and that through that knowledge, you can be innovative in creating resources. So I guess the way I want to close it out is, do you feel that it's more important for the Equity Consortium to do the work as opposed to waiting for the government to catch up?
Yes, we have to take initiative. We're no longer waiting for permission to begin or continue. For the last couple of years, the Equity Consortium, we focused on resolution systems, formerly known complaint systems. And this is a perfect example to answer your question as to recognizing the balance or the line between, or the relationship between institutional support and change and leadership, and those from what I consider like grassroots, like the people most affected, right? Let me illustrate it with the resolution system. Government support, institutional involvement comes at a very specific point in a person's harmed experience, right? So like, say, for example, I'm at work and I'm experiencing discrimination and harassment, and my boss is really being a bully, and I'm having a lot of health issues, right? There are the first opportunity to resolve this is within the organization, within the institution itself. Yeah. This is in this kind of metaphor situation. This in this scale is like grassroots. This is people powered. It's still in the people powered part of our world, right? It's nothing to do with laws, government like this. People are powering this willy nilly, like Wild West resolution systems that are super basic, like contact your supervisor, because that's all we know how to do, right? It's just people working with other people, working people. Between that and, okay, well, that's not working. What's the next step, right? Then we go to say, okay, how is the system going to help me solve this? How are the institutions? How is the justice system? How are all of these agencies going to help me, right? You can file a claim with these institutions. And we know, because there are statistics and research, you're most likely not going to prevail. There's a 95% fail rate for the EEOC, for example. And in the 5% that do prevail, their average payout's $3,500. And it takes 5 years. And they don't give you a lawyer. You have to get your own lawyer. That's with the EEOC. If that doesn't work, then you are able to file with the a civil claim, right? Get a case number, jury duty like this, which takes another 5 years. And now you probably left your job and wanting to move on with your life like this. And so that's how far apart people are and the system that's supposed to serve us. And so I'm not waiting for the system to come to the middle and say, oh, there's this big wasteland of justice here going on. We can fix it and institute it. And I'm not waiting for the organization to be able to, put their own mission aside and work on a resolution system for a year and a half and say, okay, here, we can do it like this. And so that's why we're not expecting either of these extremes to initiate the bridge in between. It's neither of their jobs or their nature. And especially those who have caused the problem, have created systems that are harmful, maybe ought not be responsible for creating systems that are to replace it and fix it. So at some point, we had to untie the Gordian knot. We had to say, okay, everybody stop. We're going to step in this one time address this void, and then we're going to go back to our regular scheduled program like this. And so there is potential in this, in having systems on the institutional, the societal side that actually do reflect what is needed from the people who are affected. And it is a process. It is a slow and deliberate, try this, oh, that doesn't work, let me try it another way, and that doesn't work, because it needs to be like that for it to be sustainable for generations. I don't mind taking 5, maybe 10 years to perfect a system before introducing it to the institutional, statewide, federal level. We should have the confidence to know that it works in the ways that we intended it to work. And so I don't mind going slow. I'm actively reconnecting with natural timing of the world, of life, of the cycles of creation and destruction. It's fine. I'd rather have a perfect product. Perfect. I can't settle for 99% anymore, because that 1% you think doesn't matter today, 10 years from now is going to matter. And so I will not move forward with anything until I'm 100%. And that's our right to do so. We deserved it and we earned it. And so I'm starting, for example, with the bridge building between, people to people, and this is the institution for us. I'm starting gently. We have to be gentle. There has to be the promise of and the ability to produce mutual benefit at every single turn. And so thinking about, like, okay, the complaint system, resolution system, we've been at odds. Like, people have been affected, and the administration, we've been on opposite sides when we don't have to be this whole time, because nobody likes harassment at work. Administrators don't like it. Employees don't like it. So we turn them and say, okay, we're going to fight this together because it's mutual benefit, mutual interest. I don't want to lose my job. You don't want to lose an employee. And so we figure out, okay, what is the language that we both understand and can agree with? And so this is just one of the steps that I see towards a future of totally redefining the employee-employer relationship. And it's based on that new role that, government and that even like your boss plays in your personal life. And this is just one of the most obvious areas to focus first, is how do we deal with complaints and conflict? It's not if, it's when. And so that's why we decided to focus there on our way to bring the past into the future. Yeah. Yeah. Wrong answers.
No,
Thank you.
no. But that's great. That's great. So if people want to get more of this wisdom from you and the Equity Consortium, how can they get in touch with you? How can they get in touch with the consortium? Go ahead and give that plug.
Wonderful. Thank you. I live for having conversations with absolutely no agenda. Our mission is not only to institutionalize equity, we are also a home for equity advocates. And no matter what position you are, whether it's official or unofficial, in your quest to institutionalize equity, we are here for all of that. And you can find us at theequityconsortium.com. There's ample information about our services and what we offer. We have an upcoming learning space, a repeat of what you were able to attend last time, Eric. It is 2 days where we share literally anything and everything we know about complaint systems. The date is June 2nd and 3rd, I believe, but it is on our website. It will be on our website. We're updating it today. And we'd love to see you there. And we've actually added a 3rd day for this time in June, and it's specifically for consultants. And so we do work with consultants. We are not selfish with our product. Our mission is to institutionalize equity. That means far and wide. And so we have a new program for equity consultants who are interested in incorporating our complaint system into their existing work, either in whole or in part. We also have new opportunities to subcontract out parts of our work with our clients because we love paying people. We just love it. Over the 5 years that we've been in business, we have subcontracted out work to over 36 of our colleagues, and we love to pay $200 an hour because we feel like that is a livable wage that is commensurate with your skill and expertise. Having lived through all of this, and so we look forward to knowing what you're up to, how we can support you, and we'd also love to see you at one of our monthly listening circles. There's been tradition for the last 5 years. We meet every last Tuesday of the month for 2.5 hours online to answer a single question. For example, a question we've had in the past, and I think it's kind of relevant to our conversation today because I had thought about it earlier, was where does love and power intersect in your life? And so we take a question like this and we just listen to everybody in turn without fear of interruption, their beautiful answer. And in this way, I have learned immensely, more than I've ever learned in my degree. It has informed all of our services and our products, and it's an invaluable source. You are life, and I would love to meet with you, learn your thoughts about the future, and see what we can build together. So Eric, thank you so much for the wonderful questions, for your patience and the timing of today. And I really do look forward to hearing more from you. Yeah.
Well, Julia, Ismael, it's been an honor to have you on, more than just your presence, but the spirit that you've emanated through these audio waves. And I wish you much continued success in the work that you're doing with the Equity Consortium. And as always, I tell guests, you have an open invitation to come back. Some burning in your chest, say, look, Eric, I need to talk about this. Just feel free to reach out and we'll get you on. So I'm glad that we were able to make the time today. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So thank you again for coming on.
My absolute pleasure. And I'm already looking forward to the next time.
All right, guys. And we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it is time for my next guest, Sean Miller. Sean Miller is a libertarian activist and founder of the nonprofit organization, the Liberty Policy Alliance. Sean seeks to advance the principles of libertarianism through limiting the power of government and the advancement of individual liberty and the concept of negative rights. And he is also a fellow Georgian. Yeah, we're both in the Atlanta area. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Sean Miller. All right, Sean Miller, how you doing, sir? You doing good?
I'm doing all right, Eric. How about you?
Doing fine. I'm just like you. We're for the audience, we're both in the Atlanta area, so we're trying to stay away from the rain today. But I'm glad, Sean, you were able to come on because I want to talk to you about your organization, the Liberty Policy Alliance, and then just kind of give your feedback about what's going on in the political world right now. So what I do is I have an icebreaker phase that interviews. So the first thing I do is throw a quote at the guest. So this is your quote. Politicians will always disappoint you, but the ideals of liberty will never let you down. What does that quote mean to you?
That means for me as an individual, that means that I not to put too much stock in what somebody says, but more their actions. Like politicians all the time, campaign season often lasts longer than the legislative sessions, especially at the state level. A lot of state legislatures are part-time. Like our state of Georgia goes from January till April, sometimes even just till March. And then you've got the special sessions, obviously. Texas meets once every 2 years outside of special sessions. But what keeps me, it's something that keeps me going, is the ideals of liberty. The ideals that people are free to live their life as long as they're not hurting people, they're not taking their stuff, they're just trying to start their business or make their money somehow, have their family, have their house with the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence. That and just being free to have that as an American. But politicians lie all the time. Politicians will tell you what you want to hear, and then vote against that very thing the very next day. So there's nothing. You, it's a cynicism that I've grown to accept, but it's a reality working in politics that you just have to live with at times.
Yeah. Well, I know that when I was, Mississippi legislature is the same way. We were in from January to like the first or second week in April. And then, usually we either work through Easter, or if it falls later in the April, we'll get out before. But we couldn't leave without a balanced budget. So give me a number between 1 and 20.
You know what? It's my favorite number. People call me weird, but number 13.
13. Okay. Do you think there is such a thing as unbiased news or media, and why?
I actually do, but it's a matter of where that source is coming from. So, for example, we see all the time on the internet, there's all these, there's now a more concentrated effort for unbiased news media. You'll see something covered in like USA Today or New York Times, something that has a more American-esque bias. But if you see American news covered in like the BBC for the longest time, the BBC would give a different sort of opinion. The headline would read completely different than what would read on the USA Today and New York Times. And those are just the big outlets. But now there's this, I see all this time on a lot of political YouTubers and political podcasters in general promote. I don't remember what the app is called, but it's designed to let you track who's more biased, what the media sources, what their bias is, what their slant is, whether it's left wing, right wing, centrist, and that allows for you, the reader, the consumer of the media, to make an informed decision based on, all right, well, this story from Fox News is telling it one way, and the story from NBC is telling it another, and then you've got your middle ground. Like I read a lot of Reason magazine articles, obviously more online than in paper now. I find Reason to be one of the more unbiased sources on the internet when it comes to how things are produced, published. Reuters, obviously the AP. The AP just takes existing stories and publishing them. But I think there are unbiased news sources. We as consumers of media, whether it's in physical newspaper or online media, especially now with the existence of podcasts, I feel like a lot of people, and this is not because attention spans are short. We've gotten lazy. We have a lot of people just aren't past reading the headline. They just read the headline and read the article. But and if you read the article, you'll find unbiased information. Whereas the headline, you just read the headline and go through it. So I think media can be unbiased, but it's not just on the media outlet themselves. It's on the consumer to seek that out. That way they have an informed opinion as well. It's a 50-50 split.
Okay. You describe yourself as an anarcho-capitalist and having radical empathy. Explain what you mean by that.
So the radical empathy is more of a jab than anything. The former chair of the Libertarian Party described libertarians as having a radical empathy problem, and that we want to help everybody as much as we can. But so that was more of a jab than anything. But as an anarcho-capitalist, I believe this is my personal belief. It's funny. It's ironic because I work in politics and I vote, but I do believe that the state is. I always go back to this Max Weber quote from Politics is a Vocation. The paper Politics is a Vocation, as the state, in order for a state, not just a government to exist, but the state itself to exist, it has to have the monopoly on the use of force. So I believe the monopoly on use of force and I'll use this, keep it short, but I believe that the monopoly on use of force by the state is illegitimate, that people have a right to defend themselves, people have a right to defend their property, people have a right to defend their family and their way of life. So, and then the capitalist part is fair on of that. Is very simple. Well, the anarcho part is also very simple. I am an anarchist. I believe that the state is. I don't believe. So there's this misconception about anarchy. When people hear anarchy, they think no rules, but in reality, anarchy means no rulers. It's self-government. I self-govern myself. I self-govern my way of life. I don't tell people what to do, what to think, but I want to teach them how. I want to teach them how to think, how to behave in a proper way that doesn't hurt people at all. And then free market capitalism, the engine that built modern society for the most part. That's my way of viewing things.
Okay. As a libertarian, what is your assessment of the president's first 100 days?
My assessment would be, to be completely honest, I do find some of the stuff when it comes to Doge and I'm going to use air quotes for the abolishment of the Department of Education. Those are policy goals for libertarians in general, is cutting government spending, abolishing the Department of Education, returning that to the states. The states have the authority to set their own education goals and standards. Those are policy goals. Now, going to reality, Doge promised $2 trillion in cuts. We're only getting like 150 billion. And the cuts seem to be more like they're not taking a scalpel to things. They're trying to be Javier Milei with the chainsaw, but reality is even the chainsaw was precise. Even Milei's chainsaw was precise. This chainsaw is going everywhere, whacking everything and anything that moves, and now you have an ugly bush in your front yard. And then the Department of Education, the abolishment, again with the air quotes on the abolishment of the Department of Education, it's a matter of it's only an executive order. We all know the Department of Education was created by an act of Congress. It can only be ended with an act of Congress for the president to sign. All this is doing is defunding it. It still exists. If a Democrat gets elected in 2028, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to restore the Department of Education to its proper glory. So there's good things, but then there's the obvious bad thing. There's the due process stuff. There's the issue with this administration thinking they can skirt due process, skirt the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendment, and it screams red flags. There's the deportations to El Salvador. Whatever you think of, I'm gonna call him Mr. Garcia because one, he's older than me, and two, I'm not gonna butcher his name. He could very well be a wife-beating criminal, but the only way to actually find out is for a proper jury trial. So I will say, and on this, there is one other absolute thing that we are happy with as libertarians, and it's that Ross Ulbricht, he was the founder of Silk Road, the dark web website using Bitcoin and all that other stuff. He was pardoned by this administration on its second day, not the first like they promised, but crying over spilt milk. Ross Ulbricht was pardoned. He did not just have his sentence commuted. So that is something that we as I will fight tooth and nail this. There's not a libertarian out there that is unhappy that Ross Ulbricht is a free man today.
Yeah. So the libertarian position dealing with like the Bitcoin and all that stuff is like, let it happen. Just, let it roll and see what goes instead of either trying to regulate it to death or just overregulate it, period.
Correct. So Bitcoin, so a lot of the problem with Bitcoin and a lot of cryptocurrencies right now is the finance bros got a hold of it. It is completely turned what Bitcoin and crypto is supposed to be on its head. It's supposed to be an alternative currency to the dollar. You're supposed to be able to use it the same way you used it for a dollar. You would use a dollar to buy like a drink or something like that. Instead, finance pros have got a hold of it and now crypto is becoming something of a like just another investment, something to add to your portfolio. When in reality, back in 2013, there was this man. He was the first man to actually purchase something with Bitcoin, and he bought 2 Domino's pizzas for delivery using Bitcoin. That's what we as libertarians want from Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. We want you to be able to, if you have it, if you have it in like your crypto wallet, you want to spend it, or you want to save it for like if something goes bad, like we hit a recession. Because there is the thing about Bitcoin especially is there's a finite amount, whereas compared to the US dollar, the government can just print US dollars. Whereas there's only a finite amount of Bitcoin that can be mined. So that's supposed to be the hedge against inflation, supposed to be able to, if the dollar dips really low, gets compared to its value, the more valuable Bitcoin is to use as a currency itself.
Okay. So talk to us about what is the Liberty Policy Alliance? Why did you feel that you needed to start this, and what is the organization's mission?
So I started the Liberty Policy Alliance towards the end of the 2022 campaign cycle because I've worked in grassroots for the past few years. In college I was a college Republican. Being a college Republican soured on me, and exposing myself to party politics soured me, and I became a libertarian at that point. But we started my friends as a way of advocating for libertarian positions at the state and local level rather than just the federal level. Because working so federal politics, Congress getting an act passed through Congress is like pulling teeth sometimes, and a lot of times it's already, if something's passing Congress, it's predetermined by the lobbyists and the leadership handing the bill to whoever, telling them you're voting on this and you're voting yes on this in a couple of hours. At the state and local level, it's a lot more involved. You can get a lot more involved at the state and local level. You meet with your state rep or your state senator, you tell them, hey, I'm very concerned with this. You can show up it's a lot easier to show up and testify. In the state of Georgia, if you see a bill coming through, it's very easy to go on to the legislature's website. All right, this bill is having a meeting in this committee at this day and this time. Go downtown, pay your $14 or however much to park, walk in, testify for or against the bill, and you're a lot more involved. So what we seek to do is using our experience in grassroots. I would, when I worked for my previous organization, we door knocked. We got volunteers out and we door knocked. If there was a bill in session we didn't like, we would target specific legislators based on certain formulaic stuff and whatnot, and won't go into the nitty gritty, the science behind it. But we would target specific legislators if they were on the committee, and we would target their district. We would target their voters. We would knock on the door, be like, "Hey," we would tell them, "This bill is in committee right now. Your state rep, your state senator, they're voting. They're a potential vote. They're a potential swing vote, yes or no. And we really want them to vote yes on this because we feel like this or that or the other." And one example, I was knocking in Alabama in 2021, and we got told that when the state rep whose district we were knocking in told the bill sponsor that they can call off the attack dogs, I'll vote yes on the bill. So we use what is called the confrontation. The idea is to use what is called the confrontation model of politics. Get down into these districts, knock on these doors, and tell the voter exactly what's going on, creating a more active constituent in the process. The idea is to give the power to the constituent. It's not necessarily just to be an asshole to these state reps and state senators. It's to get their constituents more involved, get them to realize that, hey, just because you vote twice a year in even numbered years, well, in a state like Mississippi, it's odd numbered years for the state legislature, but in the state like here in Georgia, it's you got the midterms obviously, and then the regular election cycles. But the idea is to get people involved not just during the primary, voting in the primary and voting on a general election day. The idea is to get them involved at least during the months that the legislature are in session, because I believe I'm going to butcher this Mark Twain quote, so forgive me, because of all the things I can remember, it's not this particular quote. It's the most dangerous time for man's liberty is when the legislature is in session. So the idea here, like I said, and I'll close on this, the idea here is to get an active constituency so there's not this just malaise from between primary to general election year, and then all of a sudden the state legislature's in session and this bill's passing and people are like, oh no, I didn't know, I didn't realize that my state legislator voted for this bad bill. So the idea is, that's the general idea. They get involved, get grassroots involved, get voters involved, get good legislation passed and bad legislation killed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of times, from my experience, a lot of times bills get a life of their own, and even the most diligent organization may not see it coming.
Oh yeah.
It was one year a bill came up to start a pilot program to allow hunters to bait deer. And they had picked, like, I guess 3 counties out of 82 in Mississippi to do that. And boy, oh boy, all of a sudden it was like that bill made it out of committee, made it on the floor. Next thing you know, we're on the front page of the sports section of the newspaper. It's like every legislator wanted to have their counties or their districts covered under the program. People were filling the galleries. It was absolutely amazing. And I'm not a hunter. So that was like, are we really like getting this emotional about this, But it just took a life of its own, and nobody saw that coming. It was just like, okay, well, wildlife fishery wants to try it. Let's see what happens. And then it just catapulted. So even with your most diligent effort, Sean, that sometimes you're going to miss stuff.
Yeah. There's not enough time in the world, and there's not enough people to cover. There's never enough people to cover like every nook and cranny. Sometimes things just sneak up on you for the good and the bad.
Yeah. On your website, it states that y'all are pro Second Amendment, in favor of legalized marijuana consumption and unrestricted free speech.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. So you don't want any laws concerning gun ownership in America?
Yes, we are a Second Amendment absolutist organization. You'll see on our social media that we talk a lot about abolishing the National Firearms Act, abolishing the ATF. We believe that the Second Amendment and all the Bill of Rights in general are negative rights, which means that these rights aren't granted. The Constitution is a codification of negative rights. But these rights aren't granted by government or by birth, or sorry, not granted by government or by God, that these are inherent to individuals by birth. And the Second Amendment exists as a codification of the right to self-defense by any means necessary. Now, a lot of people will take that means you want people to own tanks and jets and all this other stuff. People will obviously take the very, you'll hear that and they'll automatically go to that position. And to that I say, well, if you can afford it, by all means. If you can afford a tank, if you can afford a jet, if you can afford the fuel, by all means. I don't have that kind of money, but we do believe that right now with the AR-15 talk, the assault weapons ban talk, it's just it's a lot of low hanging fruit for gun ownership in general, but we truly do believe that the right to self defense is an absolute. The right to self defense of one's family is absolute, and that every American man, woman, child, whether they're gay, straight, transsexual, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter. You have a right to own. You have a right to defend yourself by any means necessary, and there should be no restriction on your ability to do so.
So what's your interpretation of the words well regulated in that amendment?
In the traditionalist sense, the words well regulated mean that well kept, well made, up to standards and stuff like that. I know a lot of people look at the words well regulated and think modern context of regulation, regulatory body, and like making sure and government checks and balances on stuff like that. But in the context of 1783 to 1789, when the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution were being written, well regulated was meant to mean that a person be well trained, that is the job of the individual to be well trained, well kept up to date, that they're required to do their maintenance on their firearm, they're required to do keep up to date on their own training, their own marksmanship, that sort of stuff. Well regulated in the modern context does not suit when the Constitution was written.
So do you think all 50 states and the federal government will legalize marijuana, and what would be the benefit?
In an ideal world, yes. Unfortunately, we have a lot of red states, a lot of Southern Baptists, especially, who view marijuana as this boogeyman. Here in Georgia, we just passed this THC, the limitization of THC in like beverages and carts and whatnot. That's going to harm a lot of businesses. Something similar is going on in Texas because unfortunately we have a lot of drug warriors. We have a lot of people who view marijuana as the devil's lettuce, this gateway drug. Ideally, I would love for all 50 states and the federal government to the bare minimum I want from the federal government is to deschedule marijuana. Right now, marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug, but apparently fentanyl is just this huge problem. Fentanyl, I believe, is a Schedule 3 drug at the moment. You put the logic in your head and you're just like, how does this make sense? How is it that fentanyl is this super dangerous drug that is used in medicine, by the way? There's research applications that's how the DEA schedule is based off of. Is there a medical application for it? Or is there research applications for it? Fentanyl is, I believe, Schedule 3. And so, but ideally, I would love for at least marijuana to get descheduled, because at the federal level, descheduling means a lot less severe sentence or even a rescheduling means a lot less severe sentence. The difference between Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 is at least 5 to 10 years in prison. Descheduling would mean it's barely a misdemeanor at the federal level. But right now we have 24 states, including 2 red states, Missouri and Ohio, that have legalized recreational marijuana as well as medicinal marijuana. In 2023, Oklahoma had the chance to legalize recreational. That failed on the ballot because marches where it was a ballot initiative in March, and March is where ballot initiatives go to die. So, but I think a lot of I see it all the time on like social media and when I'm talking to Republicans, the drug warrior mindset, the one that is currently going on in the legislatures, in these red state legislatures, it's dying out amongst even older Republicans. The idea that marijuana should remain illegal, like bare minimum, a lot of Republicans I've talked to in real life, in social media, and just all around, favor at least medical marijuana. We know the research applications are there. So I'm hopeful that in the next 50 years, we can at least have 50 states and a federal government that has legal medical marijuana, and if not descheduled, at least decriminalized, at least descheduled marijuana from the DEA schedule.
Why do you think it is important to have unrestricted free speech?
again, this goes back to the Constitution being the Bill of Rights being a charter of negative liberties. The idea that you have a right to, government has no right to restrict what you have to say, what you can and can't say, and whatnot. This goes down to requiring a permit. I don't think you should be required to have a permit to protest. Like a lot of colleges, when I was going to college, our college required you to, when I was an undergrad, our college required you to get a permit and give like 3 days notice. I think that's absolutely unacceptable. If you want to protest, if you and your friends want to show up with signs that call Donald Trump the devil or Joe Biden great Satan, you should be able to do that whenever, wherever, and not face any restrictions. This also goes to being able to criticize the state of Israel, which we know is a hot topic right now. If you're regardless of whether you're an immigrant or on a green card or something like that, you should be able to, once you are within the borders of the United States, because the United States Constitution is just this wonderful. It says reconnecting, but the United States Constitution is this wonderful. It's not even the first of its kind. It's just the one that perfected it. The Magna Carta was sort of the first one, the first charter of negative liberties that said man, it has this man. I'm using man in the general sense, has these inalienable rights. But the First Amendment is absolute. If you want to criticize the United States government, if you want to criticize the state of Israel while you're within the United States borders, you should be free to do so regardless. As long as you are not calling for violence on people, like causing a riot or anything like that. And even that, the threshold for saying you're causing a riot should be at a breaking point. It shouldn't be easy to break. It should be like, here's the floor and the ceiling is like way up there for saying you're trying to cause a riot and therefore you could be arrested. So I think being able to criticize the government is something that's I feel like it's just a bare minimum. You should be able to criticize your government for when it's doing wrong, just as the same way you should be able to praise your government for when it actually does something right. It goes without saying that free speech is the United States has, I won't say we've perfected the concept of free speech, but we very much have, we should be setting the example for the rest of the world on how free people should be, how it should be.
Yeah. So, but you did say there is a line. It's just got to be a long way before you cross it.
Yes. Because at some point, once you start actually threatening violence against somebody, that's when you start like the whole concept of your rights end when your fist meets my face. Essentially, that's the line. Like once you start throwing punches, once you start like harming people, throwing rocks at windows, at people's businesses, causing disturbances to people's livelihood, that's when it stops being free speech. That's when it stops being that. But that line should be that's where I feel like that's where the line is. Once you start getting violent with somebody, that's where the line is.
Yeah. So
not the threat of violence.
I got you. Your organization states that civil asset forfeiture is unconstitutional, and y'all have lobbied the Georgia state legislature to outlaw the practice. Explain to the listeners what exactly you're talking about and give us an update concerning the legislation.
So, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get any legislation to the legislature yet. But, so civil asset forfeiture is a practice that has come out of the drug war. It is essentially a misinterpretation of the takings clause under the Fourth, Fifth, and 14th Amendment of due process. Essentially, what happens is, say I'm traveling from Georgia to Alabama or Mississippi, and I'm stopped along the way. I have $10,000 in cash in my car at that very moment. The police officer sees that cash and under quote unquote probable cause says, I believe that this $10,000 cash is being used in the commission of the crime. I am going to take this using civil asset forfeiture, and here's a receipt for this, and it flips the concept of innocent till proven guilty on its head. You are now guilty until proven innocent. You are the one responsible for going to court and proving that that $10,000 is not being used in the commission of the crime, that you had a legitimate purpose for using that for having that $10,000 on you at that time, and you are now fighting for not losing your life savings. A lot of times, and it's not just cash that gets taken. A lot of times, it's cars, homes. There's plenty of stories in states all across the country where people's cars, homes, just about anything that isn't nailed down to the floor gets taken under civil asset forfeiture taking. And there are plenty of stories where the threshold for your local, so the threshold for the local police department is somewhat high. So what they'll do is they'll call the DEA in, or they'll call some in the FBI, somebody who have federal agency, and under federal guidelines, they'll get a kickback of they'll have the FBI or whatever federal agency has jurisdiction do the takings under civil asset forfeiture, and the police department will get a kickback of anywhere from 20 to 80%. So the practice is immoral. It creates this sort of, like I said, it flips due process on its head. So instead of innocent till proven guilty, you are now guilty till proven innocent. And it creates perverse incentives for police these police for profit incentives as well.
Yeah, because one of the things, I worked for the ACLU for a couple of years in Mississippi, and it's been a decade ago we were dealing with this issue and trying to get the legislature to do something with it. And, there's two things that were really, really that stood out. One is that, like you said, people are found guilty when they put the probable cause instead of total, proper due process. And if they are proven innocent, they don't get that. Most of them don't get that property back. It's gone because they've auctioned it off, or if it's cash, they've used it or whatever. And then the other thing that was really striking, there's a city right on I-20 in Rankin County named Richland. And Richland, Mississippi built a brand new police station, $1.8 million, strictly off civil asset forfeiture funds. So, like you said, there's an extreme incentive for law enforcement to do this. And so I found it interesting that your organization is on top of it and trying to address it.
Yeah, like I said, we're a strictly libertarian organization. It's not a matter of left or right, it's a matter of right and wrong, authoritarian and being anti-authoritarian. We don't care if it's our motto, and this took it some time to flesh out for a bit, and it's short, but it's simple and sweet. We endorse ideas, not people. You'll never see us endorse, very rarely actually will you see us endorse a candidate for office, but they have to make strict matching our principles. It can't be a matter of just, we think this person will pass one or two things. No, you have to be, if we endorse a candidate, it's because we believe that they'll fight for 100% of our values. But we endorse ideas because, going back to the first thing we opened up with, like, you can't trust politicians, but you can trust the ideals of liberty. And the simple matter of the fact is as long as we don't care where a bill comes from, when it comes to being a pro-libertarian ideal, pro ideals of liberty, we want it. If we want it passed, we will fight for it. We will endorse it. We will use grassroots. We will do mail. We'll go out into like wherever, and we will talk to the people about getting this bill passed. And we'll do the same for anti-freedom, anti-libertarian, anti-liberty bills as well. If we want to kill a bill, we'll do the exact same thing. But the idea is that we endorse ideas, not people, because politicians will fail you, but the ideals of liberty will not. The ideal for a free society that is built on trust, life, liberty, the ideals of life, liberty, and property, the ideals of liberty, the ideal world that the founders envisioned, obviously so far out, and you can't envision too much in 1776, but you have an idea of what you think the country should be like in 200-300 years from now. That's what we're kind of striving. That's what we're striving for. We're striving for a free world. We're striving for a world where people, regardless of race, religion, are able to live their life to the best of their abilities, defend their life, liberty, and property to the best of their abilities. And that means going after Republican initiatives like law enforcement initiatives like civil asset forfeiture and qualified immunity. So be it.
So you gave an example of what you think was government overreach that you see with the Trump administration when you're talking about the due process issue. What was a overreach that you saw in the Biden administration?
So the Biden administration will tackle the Second Amendment stuff directly first. Well, probably only because, but the Biden administration was very heavy-handed with what we view as anti-Second Amendment legislation and regulations. There is the Safer Communities Act, which tried to restrict firearm purchase and sales. There was the constant they had the committee, the executive committee with the David Hogg and all the other pro-gun. I won't call them. I would be nice enough to call David Hogg a pro-gun control activist. I feel it, but that's the respectful term I'll use for people like him. There was constant suing. There was the ATF movement. There was the use of the ATF to make rules through the Federal Register on pistol braces and stuff like that. Some of the stuff, like the pistol brace and the bump stock rule through the ATF, was actually prior Trump administration rules that the Biden administration went ahead and codified. So that was some of the stuff. The Biden administration was very heavy-handed about block and aid grants towards with gun control, pushing gun control legislation. So we were very much against that sort of stuff. And then in terms of fighting the drug war, the Biden administration pardoned a lot of people towards the end there, and made promises about at least bare minimum rescheduling marijuana or even descheduling, but never followed through. So we were constantly in our short time by the end of we only existed for the latter half of the Biden term, so it was very much like what you saw for us against the Biden administration is what you got. So but with the Trump administration, we're going to have the full 4 years of the second Trump term to really go after, and we'll have the full 4 to 8 years of a future Democratic term to go after them. So, but the Biden administration, we were definitely on them about their anti-Second Amendment policies, a lot of the continuation of the drug war policies, the use of civil asset forfeiture, defense of qualified immunity, and stuff like that. So we're hopeful that in the future, because we are not generally involved in we don't want to get involved in federal politics. We will if we have to, because we view as getting involved in the state and local level is a lot more effective, and a restoration of the 10th, and view it as a restoration of the 10th Amendment, get the states more power within the government itself, rather than just this overarching federal government. We want to return, essentially, I'll wrap it up with this. I'll land my plane here. We want to return to federalism. We want the states to be able to have distinct roles, and then the federal government to have its distinct roles. The federal government exists within the bounds of the Constitution, within the amendments, and then the state governments exist within their defined roles, within their state constitutions and their state legislature.
So, last question, will there be a viable libertarian candidate in the 2028 presidential election?
I'm hopeful. And the reason I'm hopeful is right now in the state of Georgia, well, unfortunately in the state of Georgia, we lost ballot access, and that's not to the candidate's fault. That is just, there is a myriad of things that happen that cause the Libertarian Party of Georgia to lose ballot access. And so now there are petition drives going on. I'll plug in the Libertarian Party of Georgia's multiple ballot initiative drives going on right now. There's going to be one in Cartersville, Georgia, May the 17th, 4 p.m., there are going to be a lot of lovely libertarians out there. I ask that anybody who talks to them signs the petition, because having viable third, fourth, fifth option is essential as the duopoly gets more power, tries to consolidate more and more power. But given how ballot access laws work, how tirelessly both Republicans and Democrats work to keep competing parties off the ballot, viability is not a matter. I don't think viability is a matter of the candidate itself. It's a matter of the laws at hand. If we can curtail, if we can strip down these ballot access laws, allow for the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Constitution Party, whatever political party people want to start, to be able to get on the ballot, give people more options, because we live in this capitalist society where we always tell people the more choices the better. Yet when it comes to the ballot box, we're stuck through with vanilla and vanilla bean. It's, like, people are often off, and I hear all the time, "Oh, why isn't a third party viable? Oh, why are your candidates like this?" I'm like, it's not just the candidate. It's not just the voter, the party itself, the mechanisms within the party. It's quite literally all these state ballot laws that keep third and fourth parties and independents off the ballot. We saw this with RFK Jr. There's a reason. The reason he dropped out and endorsed Trump wasn't because of some, like, well, obviously it was some machination. It was some promise of the HHS position, but he wasn't. There was no way for him as an independent to be able to continue to afford trying to fight to get on all these ballots, trying to fight all these ballot access laws. He did well for himself in the end, but it was just not sustainable. In 2026 and 2028, for libertarians, Greens to have successful, because right now, for a party to get even minor party status, they have to get 5% of the vote in a given election. 1% just to stay on a ballot. As long as they get 1%. In Georgia, it's 1% of a statewide race. 5% at the 5% in any of the 50 states gets you minor party status in that state. So the goal in the future is fighting for better ballot access laws, and won't go into the rank. I don't think we'll have time to go into ranked choice. I will not give a position. I will not give a position. I won't give my personal position or the organization's position on ranked choice at the moment. But people like star voting, people like, I forget what the other one, but we definitely need something that's not first past the post to allow for viable options. It's not just a matter of candidate quality. It's not just a matter of, like I said, it's not just a matter of candidate quality or party apparatus. It is a combination of the three. It's candidate, party apparatus, ballot access laws. And all of those things, the last one being the most important, because that's what's going to get people on airtime. But that's going to be what allows the Libertarian Party to have a good chance of claiming the presidency in 2028.
All right. So if people want to reach out to you, if people want to get involved with the Liberty Policy Alliance, how can they go about doing that?
So the first place they can go check us out is libertypolicyalliance.org. That's our website. You can always email us directly at libertypolicyalliance@gmail.com. Once we get enough funding, that'll be a more businessy email. So, but my business email is sean.miller, sean.miller @libertypolicyalliance.org if you want to reach me directly. We are on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. And I guess technically Threads, because if you have an Instagram account, you have a Threads account. It's just weird. But if you want to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms, you can do it that way. And we want to hear from everybody. We don't want to just hear from Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, Greens. We want to hear from everybody. So if you're listening to this and you want to get involved and you want to reach out, by all means, do not feel like you're being tied down to any particular label. Because like I said, we'll work with anybody to achieve what is commonly quoted as liberty in our lifetime. So I hope people who hear this reach out. I look forward to having people reach out, and I hope to make a lot of people more free in the future.
Well, Sean Miller, I greatly appreciate you coming on, my man, and talking about what your organization is doing and some of your insights and what's going on. My only child is named Sean, so that's an advantage for you there. And then the other thing is anybody that I have on the show has an open invitation to come back. So if it's something going on, if you decide, look, man, we need to talk about this ranked voting thing or whatever's on your mind, just feel free to reach out and we'll get you on. So again, thank you for taking the time and thank your best friend for allowing us to have this moment.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll gladly, if there's something going on, if we see a bill we like or dislike, whether it's at the state or local or even the federal level, I will gladly hop back on to talk about it. There are just certain causes and certain issues that I can talk if we weren't on a time crunch, I could go all day.
Yes, sir. All right, guys, and we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right. And we are back. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat. Like I said at the intro, it is time for another appearance of the podcast law firm of Pearson and Pearson. My good friends, Dr. Tracy Pearson and Melba Pearson. As you know, Dr. Tracy Pearson is based in Los Angeles, and she is a legal, political, and cultural analyst and strategist who appears weekly on the popular, smart, and entertaining radio program Tell Me Everything with John Fugelsang, which airs on Sirius XM Progress 127. And Melba is an attorney specializing in civil rights and criminal law with an emphasis on policy. She is the director of prosecution projects at the Gordon Institute for Public Policy and co-manager for the Prosecutorial Performance Indicators Project based at Florida International University. Melba also has a weekly web show called Mondays with Melba and her podcast, The Resident Legal Diva. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have my good friends, Melba and Dr. Tracy Pearson, the podcast law firm of Pearson and Pearson. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the podcast law firm of Pearson and Pearson is in the house. Dr. Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Melba, how you doing?
I'm good, my brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Just, we've survived the first 100 days.
Barely.
I know, right? And so now we asked y'all to come on because one of the highlights, it seems like, of these first 100 days was there were a lot of judges going to work. I think there were some federal judges that had kind of been staying in the low light for years and years. And I know there's one gentleman, I think he's been on the bench 41 years, and he had to make a ruling on something that Trump did. So I thought that maybe the best people to analyze what's been happening were attorneys, people that practice the law and study the law and pay attention to legal issues going on. So the first question I wanted to throw out to both of y'all is, what is the most important legal issue that has emerged from these first 100 days?
Ooh. The most important one? I mean, So two things. I know I'm supposed to pick one, but due process is incredibly important because that's like folks have heard of that term in the abstract, and I think they don't understand what that actually means in practice. And so clearly the courts are going to have to rule in terms of the due process due to immigrants, the due process due to even citizens who end up getting deported and vis-a-vis the 2 and 3-year-old children that were citizens and got deported with their moms despite, there was a parent that resided in the U.S. and wanted them with them. And, it seems that the mothers were under duress at the time that they ended up, quote unquote, agreeing to be deported with their kids. So the whole due process aspect, I think, is huge, but also respect for the courts. Because again, when you have a federal judge saying, bring Mr. Kilmar Garcia back to the U.S., and you have the president being like, yeah, I can, but nope. It's like that stare down, that I'm daring you to do something about it. And I don't think that that's going to be resolved until one of these judges tells somebody to bring their toothbrush and sit in the dock and have to take their behinds to jail for contempt and sit there for 6 months. That's the, and if it's the line prosecutor, the line assistant U.S. attorney, that's one thing. But I honestly think it should be the attorney general, because she's the one who's the puppet master behind all of this, forcing the assistant U.S. attorneys to target people, to make arguments that they know are inaccurate, that they know are contrary to the law. And she's pushing for all of that. And if you dare to stand up and be like, actually, I don't think this argument makes sense, or you're in court and the judge asks you a question and you answer it honestly, like, I don't know, judge, the next thing you know, you're like fired. And that's not how any of this works. That's not how this is supposed to work. So I'm going to pause there because I could rant all day.
I agree. I think that due process is important. I think there's a couple things. One is the fact that people don't know what law is. I've seen this a bunch of times, and I want to throttle folks who should know better. Executive orders are a kind of law. They have the force of law in certain circumstances. Proclamations don't. I mean, they're just proclamations, statements of policy. But executive orders do have the force of law. Otherwise, you couldn't challenge them in court. And the issue is, what strength does it have in comparison to the other kinds of law that we have? We have rules and regulations. We have court-made law. Those are things like the Supreme Court decisions. And we have legislation. And when people think about law, they often think about legislation. So they think about the law that's made by Congress, and it's introduced in the House or the Senate, passed by the other house, then goes up to the president for signature. That's a statute. And people don't seem to, like, I'll see this constantly. It'll say, executive orders or EOs aren't law. No, they are. They just aren't as strong, and they can be overturned by the courts. And so it's really important that people not brush that off. I'm also 1,000% with Melba on this. Pam Bondi should never have been confirmed.
Facts. Sorry.
Yeah, she should never have been confirmed, and the people in the Senate should be ashamed of themselves, and they should turn their bar licenses in, because Pam Bondi was on the team for the first impeachment. That made her have a conflict of interest that lasts until beyond her client's death. And so she can't represent the Department of Justice, which is the attorney for the government and ultimately the people, versus Donald Trump personally. And we've heard her misrepresent what her function is repeatedly in the press. She should be disbarred. And I certainly hope to have somebody in the DC bar is pursuing this.
In the bar? Or the Florida bar?
Any of the bars would be good because of reciprocity. But if you are a U.S. attorney, a U.S. attorney, or even an assistant U.S. attorney, anybody who's acting in the role of an attorney in this Department of Justice, and you disagree with what you're being told to do, you have an obligation to quit. Mm-hmm. After you remonstrate with leadership, you have an obligation to quit. And frankly, I would quit rather than get fired, because I can justify the quitting. The firing can get ugly for you if you're applying to jobs, but quit because the rules of professional conduct for lawyers actually matter. They actually matter. And it just seems like any rule or law or, I don't know, the Constitution, all of this stuff has just gone poof out the window. Like none of it seems to matter anymore. And it's not norms. It is, these things don't seem to matter in people's consciousness. And I don't get it.
And I would actually slightly disagree on one small fact. I think that you might be better off getting fired. And the reason why is, number one, at least you can get unemployment. Because again, if you haven't been stacking your checks, like planning for, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was going to be working for a tyrant, right? Not, most people don't have that money stashed away to be able to pay their rent and all of that, for a few months until they get a new job. And this is a tough job market. Now, I think also depending on where you're applying to, a lot of assistant U.S. attorneys, if they leave, they generally go to big firms. So if they're applying to firms that are currently fighting this administration, which is where I think you would apply, you wouldn't apply to one of those that rolled over. I almost think getting fired is a badge of honor in certain circles. But, yes, it can still get messy, right? But then also, too, you may be able to preserve a case for wrongful termination later on down the line, too. So everybody's situation's different.
Yeah, no, and I hear that. And I absolutely hear that. Where I'm coming from on it is, first of all, you want to maintain what we call your ticket, right? You want to maintain that ticket, that license. And so if they're doing bad stuff, that stuff may bounce back on you at some point. So if you quit, you have repudiated whatever they've asked you to do. But also, constructive discharge is a thing. It's the hardest claim to make, but it is something that it is a thing. And I hope they aren't going to work for those big firms that are just bending and kissing rings. I mean, that's jumping from the fire pan into the fire.
To get to the Pam Bundy point, why do you think that nobody has made the effort to have her disbarred? She is clearly, I understand your point, Dr. Pearson, or Tracy, on her conflict of interest. And that should have been brought up in the hearing. Well, I guess it was between Stackhouse and a couple of the others. I think they, probed it as well as they could. But just this whole issue about due process, it would seem like, that her actions since she has been sworn in would indicate that she is not ethically following the law as far as the practice of law, as far as being a U.S. Attorney General, as far as being separated from the president and then going on TV shows and basically saying, yeah, we're not going to offer due process. That would seem like to me, if I was an attorney in Georgia, the minute that I would have, or a DA, and the minute I said, no, we're just going to send him straight to Milledgeville, to the prison. We're not even going to have a trial for him. Everybody, the governor would be like calling a special session to have me disbarred. So I'm trying to figure out why nobody in the legal circles that could mount that kind of a challenge, especially even in Melba, in your home state in Florida, it would seem like somebody would say, yeah, no, I don't think you need to be practicing law. If that's your attitude, then we need to take that license, because your license, and I didn't go to law school and all that, but I understand that once you get your license from the state, and that gives you, or I don't know if there's a step you have to take, but that gives you the right to practice law in the Supreme Court, in the federal courts, because they give you, I've seen every law office I've been to, there's that state law bar license, and then the big pretty things with the capital on it that says you can practice law at the federal level. So it seemed like if she was disbarred at a state, that she couldn't be attorney general because she couldn't practice law in D.C. either.
Well, sort of, kind of. So when you're barred, what ends up happening is that you can practice in the highest state court of your state. So it might be, in the instance of Florida, I'm barred in Florida, so I can practice in front of the Supreme Court of Florida. Now, if I want to practice in federal court, I then have to be barred federally. And that's also jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Now, separately, for instance, I'm barred in the District of Columbia, so I can practice law in Florida or in the District of Columbia. For the U.S. attorneys, attorney general, whatever, you just have to be barred somewhere in the country. So even if, let's say, she was disbarred in Florida, if she still had a D.C. admission, she could still be attorney general. Now, if Florida was the only bar admission she had, and that was taken away, well, then now there's a serious issue. Now, but to go to your question, Eric, I think that people are still afraid because I think it's slightly different than the situation with Giuliani, how his law license was revoked in New York and I think in DC as well. And again, it was already after he had gone to trial and all of this other foolishness came out. Excuse me. It's that he lost kind of all relevance and power and like nobody was afraid of him anymore. He didn't have access. There wasn't, a fear of retribution or anything like that. So I guess folks went and kicked him when he was down, which I have no issue with, and rightfully so. And then he was able to be disbarred. I think people are still afraid of the access and power that Pam Bondi has at the moment. And, I do think someone needs to be brave and do it. But again, knowing that she supervises the U.S. attorneys in the state of Florida. So if even if you don't do criminal practice or whatever the case may be, somehow something funny can happen in your world and you end up in the federal criminal system, right? So I think people are afraid of that backlash, and that's why it hasn't been done. Now, I think maybe by year 2, year 3 of the administration, when you start to get into like lame duckville, because usually most most attorney generals and U.S. attorneys as well don't last past one administration. So whether it's, we saw this in the Biden administration, the attorney general served for both Biden terms. But if you look at, in Obama's term, you had Eric Garner, right? I didn't say that wrong.
Eric Holder.
Yeah. Eric Holder, right? I'm like, wrong Eric, right? Yeah. Eric Holder. And then you also had Loretta Lynch, right? So you had 2 different ones. But I think that once you kind of get towards the end of that presidential term, that's where maybe you might see some activity because, again, they're less afraid of repercussions. My thought.
I think, and everything that Melba said is right. But there's another interesting path, which is, and for me, when I was admitted to the bar, I was admitted to my state bar. And then I don't know if my state was unique this way, but I was also admitted into the federal bar just pro forma. And you had to show up and put your hand up and do the whole thing. And it was a cute little ceremony and you got your certificate. That's the one that you're talking about, sort of with the Capitol and everything on it. And the Supreme Court's a different story. It's a special admission that you have to be sponsored and apply and the whole thing. And it's great. It's wonderful. But most lawyers don't practice in the Supreme Court. So it's an honor thing, I think. And I don't have admission in the Supreme Court. It's a trip down to DC. It's the whole thing. But when it comes to the federal courts, this is where it kind of gets a little fun. And that is judges can revoke your ability to practice there. Because it's not necessarily, you can practice in your state, that's fine, but you cannot practice in this court. And so if you're doing something, you're in contempt. You're the lawyer who, now I'm finding you in contempt as a lawyer. They will open proceedings in the court, in the federal court, to hold you accountable and bar you from practicing in that federal court. They have jurisdiction over their own court system. And then sometimes they'll just refer attorneys to the state bar, but they can actually stop you from appearing in that court. And I've seen it happen to lawyers. I've seen lawyers face the potential of it. It's very rare. But I think in this situation, when we're talking about the gentleman in El Salvador who's been sent to El Salvador and doesn't belong there, and they're not cooperating with orders, and they are lying. They are manufacturing evidence, and they are firing the assistant U.S. attorneys who are telling the court the truth, because the rules of professional conduct are not in order of importance. The most important rule is 3.3, which is hand it to the tribunal. And so you must tell the court the truth. And if you are asked a question by the judge, you must answer that question. And that lawyer who ended up being put on administrative leave and I think fired, who actually answered the court honestly, he was following, I think it was he was following the rules. You have to tell the truth. Otherwise, the entire judicial system falls apart. That's why it's the most important rule. You have to remonstrate with your client. If your client is doing something, stupid that could result in lying to the court. I had a client once who did lie to the court, and it wasn't when I say it wasn't intentional, it wasn't like they contrived to do it, but I had that person file an affidavit saying I made a misstatement of fact. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to do it, but this, and an explanation. And I made the lawyer, or rather the client, do that because it was so critical that the court have truthful information, and it was going to impact the rest of the case. He couldn't look like a liar. So I think that this case in particular is one, and thank God I'm not that judge, because they are going to really have to think about what the range of consequences are at their disposal. And, given the fact that Pam Bondi controls, federal law enforcement to a degree, like, U.S. Marshals, how are we going to enforce these orders that are being issued?
Yeah, and that's been a big topic of the discussion as far as the enforcement, because a lot of people just think, if they don't follow the order, then they can just send the U.S. Marshals, go and say, no, the U.S. Marshals fall under the Attorney General. So, if the judge, and the judge doesn't have that, well, somebody was trying to explain that the judges have some kind of power where they can designate somebody to carry out a contempt order. And, it's like, I don't think the judges have the same power. Like if something is going on in a particular state, then the president of the United States can deputize the National Guard, federalize it, and give a direct order superseding the governor of that state, right? I don't think judges have that same ability, but they were saying there's some kind of special, like, prosecutor or some kind of special marshal that they can appoint. And of course, all this stuff is new, so I had never heard that before. Have any of y'all heard that kind of power before?
I have not, but also I don't really do a lot of federal practice. So,
Yeah. I think sort of we're conflating two things. One is who enforces the orders, but the other is who prosecutes the thing that needs prosecuting. And so the court can appoint an attorney to prosecute an issue if the DOJ won't do it under very special circumstances. And this has been talked about, I think, in one of the orders, that we're going to do it this way. And these are the steps we're going to follow. And right now we're at that first step where we're going to do some discovery. And then we're going to decide, as we get more information, whether either the DOJ is going to do some prosecuting if there's something to be prosecuted here after we do discovery, or if not, I'm going to appoint an attorney to do the prosecuting. And a federal judge can in fact do that.
So in essence, though, because I think the lower court judge, the district judge, is Paula Zennis, I think her name is. And I think she's the one who is trying to figure out, as you were pointing out, Tracy, what she can do. If she finds that, if they did something wrong or they're not following the order that she gave, she's trying to figure out what she can do in order to get compliance, and quickly explain the word salad game that they were playing with facilitate and expedite, right?
Oof.
So Judge Zennis said that the administration needs to facilitate and expedite Mr. Abrego Garcia's return. Then the Supreme Court turned around and said that the administration needs to facilitate, but deliberately left out the word expedite. And then the administration started running around and saying, oh, that's a victory for us. It just says we have to facilitate. Doesn't mean we have to expedite. And then another judge came back and said, yeah, so facilitate means a little more than what you think. I think, It's one thing to just pick up the phone and say, hey, you want to bring him back? No. Okay, cool. It's a little more effort than that. So y'all kind of talk why the administration is trying to play this word salad game.
Because they don't want to do it. Plain and simple. They're looking for a way. And that's something that I'd never like to give him credit for anything, but they've been very good at taking something that is basic, a basic word like the, and twisting it 10 different ways from sunrise, where you're sitting there like, does the really mean what I think it means? Like, am I, it's like a gaslighting on an epic level, right? And so we all know what facilitate means. It means you need to pick up the phone, get him over there, hey, what do we need to do? And get him back. Now, the expedite thing, that was problematic because, again, Mr. Abrego Garcia needed to come back yesterday, basically, and they're going to drag their feet on it. And we know that. We know this administration is going to drag their feet. So that's why it was very problematic that the Supreme Court didn't also say you needed to expedite it, because they could be like, sure, we'll bring him back in 3 years.
Yeah.
He's going to be even alive in 3 years, but facilitate means you need to bring him back. You need to do more than just pick, like you said, pick up the phone. No, you don't want to do it. Click. No, you need to, what do I need to give you? Or do I need to do a trade? Whatever it is, you got to figure it out and make sure he comes back.
Yeah, I've been frustrated with folks, in the social media area, because people are primed. They are very much primed to, they hate the Supreme Court. They hate this. They hate this. If this isn't happening the way that they want it to, then that person's bad. And when I saw the order that said facilitate, I went, good, because that's legal. The United States cannot, the U.S. Supreme Court cannot order a party that is not before it to do something. So it cannot order El Salvador to return this man. It can only order the United States to facilitate his return. Now, what I have said is that the family needs to sue El Salvador or bring El Salvador into the case. And I always thought, well, why didn't they do that from the very beginning to some degree and have a original jurisdiction out of the U.S. Supreme Court? Because it would be another nation. But I think that people really need to stop. Like, they are just, everything is bad, and they're operating on this dysregulated nervous system response. And people really need to think through, or ask people that do understand it, why something is happening rather than reacting to it. And it's really hard to do when we're in crisis. But there's so much bad information out there. So I'm glad that you asked that question. Why are they not doing it? They're not doing it because Donald Trump has never taken responsibility for a single thing in his life, except things that he claims are good. And nothing, it's outrageous. It's absolutely blatantly freaking wrong. They know it's wrong. They aren't doing anything about it. And they're manufacturing evidence on this man's hand to justify something. And it's absolutely insane, because it's not just about this man. It's about every single one of us, whether you are Black, whether you are white, whether you are somebody who is Asian, whether you're somebody who comes from a Latina heritage. It is just, it's every single one of us, because see, we're having this conversation right now, and this conversation could be determined to be unlawful with an executive order tomorrow. And so it's every single one of us that has to be concerned about what's happening here with this. It's not just about this man.
Yeah. Yeah. I people used to accuse me of being a lawyer, but they also used to accuse me of being a preacher too. So take that for what you will. But, I never studied the law like that, formally. And, although I did have a privilege to make some, but I never practiced. So I don't really get what's going on. And the biggest thing that's troubling me is these law firms, right?
Mm.
So it's like, I remember back in 1989 in Mississippi, we had a very unique situation. We were trying to get black lawyers elected to the Chancery Court because in Mississippi, the Chancery Court deals with property matters as well as, divorce and all that other stuff, but probate. And so we didn't have any black chancery judges. And so a lot of lawyers got elected. So what had happened, there was a lot of firms that were dissolved because those lawyers now were moving to the bench. And so there was a lot of reorganization going on. And I was doing my best behind the scenes to try to encourage people, especially in Jackson, to say, we need to have a black super law firm, right? We need to get all y'all together in one big firm and, compete with the Butler Snows and the Phelps Dunbars and all those other big firms that were in Jackson. Needless to say, it did not happen. And I'll have to tell y'all the story off the air because we don't have time, but why it didn't. But my mindset was a super law firm was what everybody was seeking to either create or get to in their law practice. If you could get to one of those big firms, you made it. And it's like you're guaranteed money. You got all these resources behind you to, litigate your case and do whatever you got to do. And so, when I'm seeing law firms who have been established for a number of years, who represent Democrats, Republicans, dogs, cats before the federal court, and just, and do, and just, they walk around. I think there was some type of term that they used to use for those firms, like the white shoe firms.
White shoe.
Yeah. It's like you would think that if there was anybody that, as the president of the United States, I wouldn't want to go to court against or challenge, it would be those firms. Now, it was a little old firm of, Eric Fleming and, Foggy Hogsworth or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got this little practice in Atlanta. We went as the David trying to slay Goliath. Yeah, we probably going to get smoked. You know what I'm saying? We're probably going to, the president's going to treat us like stepchildren. But these white shoe firms, I don't understand why they're bending the knee. So y'all practice law. Y'all interact with these people, even if you're not members of those firms. Why would a law firm do that?
First of all, these are the vast majority of law firms in this country are solo practitioners, small law firms like partnerships or medium-sized firms, which have a very small number of attorneys. That is the vast majority of law firms in this country, and they're good. You find really great ones. And if you look at cases that have been decided, you will see that oftentimes it is not one of these big law firms. These big law firms need security clearances because a lot of them do work in that sector. So like the technology sector, and they interface with the government. Their clients need to have security clearances. So if you have a client that has a security clearance and you're working on something that relates to, let's say, the Department of Defense, or that relates to something having to do with national security, your client can't use you if you can't look at the documents. And your client doesn't want to be associated with you under those circumstances because they may be at risk. That was one of the primary underlying things that struck that first firm. They were losing clients, and their practice, that this big law firm was in danger of being decimated. I agree with you. The last person you want to sue is an attorney because, we're good. We know how to think about these things, unlike the average everyday citizen who isn't trained in the law. Unfortunately, when you get trained in the law, your brain gets sort of reorganized in a way that makes you, difficult to talk to. But I think and you stop learning how to use like the photocopier. That goes away too. I swear, it's true. Staplers, just marginal. But I think that is the primary driver behind some of this. So what's happening is outrageous and stupid. And I can say that 1,000 times during this interview, outrageous and stupid. And I can tell you, I would not have bent the knee, and I would have fought it in court and gotten the injunction and done everything I could PR wise to fight back. And it's sad and frustrating. The other thing is that they could be taking sort of possibly sort of just very quickly genuflecting, but yeah, okay, fine, we'll do 100, however many millions of hours of pro bono service for those people, but we're also going to be doing it for the other people too. And they also know they have conflicts. So, for example, they can't, if you've represented Hillary Clinton or the Democratic Party in a particular situation, let's say the Democratic National Party in a situation, you can't represent the Republican Party because there is a rule that says you can't, because there's a conflict of interest there. And there is no wall that can be created. You're working at opposing interests most of the time. So they may, in some ways, be figuring out how to rationalize that in the background. I could be completely wrong about that.
Well, I will say this. I say it's a lack of backbone, because the reality is you're going to lose clients one way or the other. If you bend the knee, you end up losing clients and your name is trash. If you stand up and fight, you may lose your security clearance, but at least you still have your dignity. And folks will be like, listen, I know I can't deal with you right now because of what's going on, but as soon as this matter is resolved, I'm coming back, right? Because it shows you stand for something. This week, it was released that Microsoft fired the firm that they were working with because they genuflected to the administration and they hired a firm that was fighting the administration. So, hello to land Microsoft as a client. That I think that kind of offsets whatever clients you may have lost in the process by standing up to this administration. And then also, you can't forget what this does internally. When I tell you my LinkedIn timeline is filled with associates who have been, working at these firms and were like, this was my entire dream. I was top of my class. I couldn't wait to start working at XYZ firm. And now they've genuflected and I can't in good conscience continue to work here. And they literally walked out of their dream job. So when you have all the people that are going to do the work heading for the front door, and you may have trouble now recruiting new people to take their place because they're like, no, I don't want to come into this mess. I don't want my name now sullied thinking that I co-sign what you did. That's going to have long-lasting damage and effects to those firms. So it's one of those things that, you kind of pick your poison, and do you basically want to die with your boots on but with some dignity, or do you want to basically go out on your back because you genuflected and it still, at the end of the day, did not absolve you or have you immune from all of the other collateral consequences from being involved during this time?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tracy.
I was just going to say that, the folks that called it their dream job. I mean, I never dreamed to want to work for any of those firms. I always saw those firms as defense firms, as business firms, as corporate firms, and working for not the human being, but for the entity. And so working for the greedy money. So I didn't want to do that. And when you work for a firm like that, at least in my experience, you spend about 7 years bag carrying for people. And you sit in the tiny cubicle near the library and you're doing all this research and all this writing, and you get to go and watch. I went out. I started practicing. I was trying a case the day that I got admitted to the bar and won. But I started practicing immediately. And during law school, the folks that were, sort of headed in that direction did different activities than what I was doing. I was hustling for every law firm that needed somebody to be a research assistant or a law clerk and trying to gain actual practice experience. So I think that the advantage of those big law firms is a lot of money. There's a lot of money in those jobs, and you work your butt off on billable hours because it is hard to achieve the billable hours that they're looking for. And yeah, you get status and you get money, but you also have to deal with all this. And I am so hopeful, and I have those lawyers in my thoughts who have had to leave, that the universe is going to put you in the right place at the right time to do the thing that you were meant to do, and good for them for leaving.
Yeah, because that was the point Melba was making to me, is like, it's one thing to lose clients, but if you start losing the lawyers, then it's like you can't even maintain the firm at this particular point. I appreciate the angle, Tracy, that you were bringing in about maybe this Jedi mind trick kind of thing where it's like, yeah, we can say that we're going to give so many hours, but knowing that there will be a conflict and we really can't do that. See, but the only reason why I don't jive with that is because Donald Trump's got his hands in so much dirty stuff. Him, his family, his associates, all these guys, and I'm looking at this whole crypto thing. I'm thinking most of that, all these emoluments that he's getting, that's where he's trying to build a legal team when the Democrats take over. Because if it was me, now maybe I'm too petty, and that's probably why I'm not in elected politics anymore. But the minute that the Democrats, if they flip both houses, if they flip the House and the Senate, they're going to go after, in my mindset, they would be going after impeachment. And what Donald Trump is doing, it seems like he's blackmailing these firms to say, okay, when the Democrats come at me this time, I'm going to have these white shoe lawyers coming in, the best law firms, or at that time, the best law firms in D.C., walking into the Capitol building and trying to defend me against, whatever impeachment or whatever charges they're going to bring against me or Pam Bundy or Kash Patel or Pete Hegseth, any one of these casted characters, right? I think that's what he's lining this up to do. I think his end game is always get out of jail free.
I was going to say, I agree and disagree simultaneously. I agree that, yes, he's definitely, trying to create basically a mini task force of attorneys to protect him in the future. But also remember the executive order that just came out around, law enforcement and all of that. And basically he is going to have these firms, or attorneys are going to be provided to law enforcement members who, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically who end up getting prosecuted for, executing their duties and being, tough on crime and all of this. Read between the lines. Department of Justice basically no longer has a civil rights division. Like, the name is there, but they're not doing the typical work of, going after police departments that have a pattern and practice of abusing marginalized communities or things like that. So they came in the wake of Louisville, Memphis, like every single high profile police brutality case, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division would, come in and investigate. So in this new executive order, he's basically like, no, I'm going to up the ante. I want cops to go out and brutalize these communities, and then I'm going to have these white shoe firms defend them. And so rather than having the DOJ prosecute them, he's going to find ways to defend them, which then incentivizes more racial profiling and more abuse of marginalized communities. So I think it's multifold. It's protecting himself, but it's also throwing a bone to the corrupt members of law enforcement who want to abuse people.
Yes.
Also in their whole, the craziness around the immigration and doing all these sweeps and, oh my gosh, I stopped someone. Oh, well, it turned out to be a U.S. citizen. Yeah, they didn't tell me that. And next thing you know, they're sitting there in ICE custody for a week, and mom and everybody's here like, here's a birth certificate, here's a social security card. What do you mean? Which already has happened in the state of Florida. I mean, it's happened in a few different places already, Arizona. So basically, when those people finally turn around and sue and be like, okay, this was a wrongful detention, I was racially profiled, he will now trot out these big firms to defend the racist policies that he's setting forth.
Yeah, exactly. Because that executive order, there's a word that's used in there, and it jumped right off the page at me, and it said the Department of Justice will indemnify law enforcement. And I sat there and I thought about that word for like hours, and unconsciously for hours. Indemnified. Like, you're going to be indemnified. Are you going to be what? We're going to be paying the damages that juries award, because that's what that sounds like. But indemnified can also mean that you may get counsel from these firms. And I mean, a lot of these cases are brought in state court first. And again, these firms are big. They have the capacity and the resources to dump 17,000 documents on you in a click. But, there are ways around this. There are ways. Small firms do an excellent job. All you need is a little bit of passion, and you can take these firms on. You also have document reviewing attorneys. There are a lot. I've noticed on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've noticed this, Melba, but there are lots of companies that are sort of jumping up for document review that I haven't seen before. And you can contract as an attorney to be a document reviewing attorney, where you get this online link and you just start like tagging documents that may have something to do and is relevant for the thing that they're at issue in the case. So I don't think it's hopeless. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that, but I don't think it's hopeless. But I also think that his power is waning, even though he's using it. And people who supported him are slowly turning, and he's calling them stupid. The other day we heard that, he was questioned about people, your supporters are saying that they didn't vote for this. And he said, oh, yes, they did. I campaigned on it. So what he said in that sentence was, you're stupid. And people don't take kindly to that. I mean, and we're going to be in a situation here where the economy is crashing. And once that happens, you can have all the law enforcement you want. Frankly, there's more of us than there is of them. So I am hopeful that the parade of horribles that I see in the very accurate description given by Melba will not pay out. They won't happen. But I am prepared for it.
And I'm almost speechless, because it's like, as diabolical as that sounds, excuse me, that's a reality that we're going to have to deal with. So I don't want to end the conversation on such a dire note. What can people do within the law to kind of protect themselves? Are y'all involved with discussions with people? You said it kind of jokingly, but those of us who do this little podcast, now my little old podcast, I'll probably be like 20,700th before on the warrant list. But, what can people do to kind of protect themselves at this particular point, as far as protecting their right to speak and, making sure that they have due process? Because one of the examples I liked was the fact that that young man that was in Vermont who was going to take his citizenship test, and he gets detained, at the courthouse, and he's like literally just that one step away. Once he passes that test, he gets to take the oath, and they detained him. And if it wasn't for the people in the community, being aware of that situation and doing all those steps that they needed, he would have been in Jenna, Louisiana, like everybody else. And so, or somewhere else. And so, I take that as one of the positive things we can do. But real quick, anything that y'all can think of that people should be doing to kind of protect themselves?
So super quick, number one, know your rights. That starts with know your constitutional rights. Download the Constitution app, read it. Okay. Pays very special attention to the amendments. Okay. Because those are the things that will, that you can use to argue for, even in the moment, because sometimes cops will back down. If you're like, this is unconstitutional. No, I don't have to give you my ID. Am I free to go? Am I in custody? I'm not. Goodbye. And you can turn around and walk away. People don't know that. In terms of ICE shows up at the house with a warrant. Is it an administrative warrant or is it a judicial warrant? Because a judicial warrant, yeah, they can kick down your door. An administrative warrant, they sure can. So if you don't let them, you have the right to not let them into your home if it's an administrative warrant. So those are the nuances that people have to be aware of, because again, you may be giving them latitude when they don't have the power, and now you've put yourself in a situation. Lastly, I would say that I've seen this I read about this either in San Diego, I believe, where they're now starting to do community patrols, and they're looking to see, okay, is there ICE activity? And they would turn around and report that to the undocumented members of their community. And basically it's almost like Underground Railroad type stuff, right? And we've got to take those lessons from Reconstruction, from enslavement, from the first civil rights movement, and dust them off and tweak them for today. We've got internet, we've got Signal, we've got all of these different ways that we can communicate effectively that they didn't have back in the day when they were like sending out a passenger pigeon to let people know, like, hey, we ride at dawn, right? So, it's about coming together in community, knowing your rights, and defending each other. Because this is not the time for us to be in silos talking about, because listen, if it's the Latin community that's going now, trust and believe the Black community is right behind, right? And then after that, they're going to come find, poor white people. But yeah, so we all have to realize that our fortunes and our futures are intertwined. And if we don't know that, we're done.
I 100% agree. I'm going to add to that. Know the difference between a politician and an activist. Politicians are reformists. They work in a system. They're subject to rules and procedures and the norms of their system. And we can't have them arrested and not able to vote, because some of these votes will come down to 1 or 2 votes. They're doing their job that you sent them there to do. Your job is to be the activist, and activists work outside the system. And so it's on the people. And no revolution, if you will, has ever been started by a politician. It's always been started by the people, and politicians then get on board. So I urge people to understand the difference and stop attacking the people that you need to help in the system that exists. You can work outside the system. Second, I'm talking specifically to the legal community. One of the things that has frustrated me is that we have been in a situation where people are waiting until the bad thing happens, and then they pursue litigation. I love a declaratory judgment. And I think attorneys need to actively step up, engage in pro bono work, and start helping these communities seek declaratory judgment so that we can protect these communities, because we know what he's going to do and we know what he's done. I think that during the pandemic, we formed these little pods of people. And I think it's time that we need to establish democracy pods. Know your neighbors. Know who they are. Protect them. They will protect you. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a good example. I live in Los Angeles. We go through fire season like 24/7 now, but we had some really bad fires in the city of Los Angeles. And there was a fire about, I don't know how far away. It was probably less than a mile away from me, and up at Runyon Canyon. And immediately we all gathered outside trying to figure out, is this coming at us? And it was coming at us. Is this something that we need to bug out for? And we all had a plan of how we were going to help each other and who was going to take who and what car. And I think that's really important, that you be thinking about looking out for the person in your community. Because, and when I say community, I mean, know your neighbor, know the names. Some of us don't know the names of our neighbors. Know who they are, check in on them, make sure they're okay, because we're going to have to stand up for other people. And if you have power and agency, I have power and agency. It's all relative, but I have power and agency. I'm going to stand up for you. And I hope that you'll stand up for me. And if we all sort of link arms that way, it's going to make a difference moving forward. The other thing is, I just want to point out is that law school applications are on the rise. And I read this dumb article. I don't know which publication it was in. And they were talking about, and they said it was because of the economy. Now, historically, yes, when the economy goes crappy, people go to school. No, people want to be lawyers because they want to help. That's what's happening, is that people are angry and they want to help. They want to make a difference. And so if you are interested in making a difference, go find a nonprofit. They need your help. Go help. Go help the ACLU. Go help the various nonprofits that exist in your community that you're interested in, and volunteer, because there is so much work that needs to be done and they don't have enough people to do it.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, ladies, for that. Melba and Dr. Tracy, the podcast law firm are Pearson and Pearson. I thank y'all for coming on and not only enlightening me, but enlightening the audience as far as where we are and what we can do. Cause I think that's the most important thing. So I thank y'all for coming on and doing that. And we'll, it looks like we're going to have to get together soon, but you know, I'll reach out and we'll figure it out.
Always a pleasure, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. We love your audience, and we're glad that you give us this platform. So absolutely, I'm happy to come back
Anytime.
All right, guys, we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. So real quick, I want to thank Julia Ismael, Sean Miller, and my good friends, Dr. Tracy and Melba, the podcast law firm of Pearson and Pearson, for coming on. I hope that y'all got something out of that. I know I did. And I greatly appreciate y'all listening. Again, it was a long show, but I hope that you agree that it was well worth it. So thank you for indulging on that. I won't get into any real commentary in closing out, but I just want to remind y'all we're still trying to get 20,000 subscribers on Patreon. And maybe when we have long episodes like this, what I had been doing was going on Patreon and offering commentary so people that subscribe can listen, you know, so definitely going to have to get back to doing that. But please, 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 the sooner we can get to 20,000, the sooner that you will be guaranteed that this podcast will be on for as ever long as it needs to be. All right. So again, thank y'all for listening. Until next time.
NBG Podcast Network.